It's amazing what a little sunshine will do, isn't it? These fritillaries have just burst into flower, lifted up their heads and lifted my spirits too. Now, they come from the Middle East, so they like good drainage and a nice sunny spot. So I've planted them right on the edge of what is really quite a shady border. The first rule about plants is to plant them where they're going to thrive, quite obviously. So if you can find out the conditions that they enjoy in the wild, then you're 3/4 of the way there. A bit further into the border, for example, where there's quite a lot more shade, I'm going to plant some of these relatives of our native primrose. Now, you'll know that primroses and cowslips love to grow amongst grass and other wildflowers, and that's because they get lots of sunshine in the spring, and then later on the grass and things like cow parsley will grow up and shade them. So the obvious place to put them in the garden is underneath deciduous trees or shrubs, where they'll get plenty of light in the spring and nice dappled shade a bit later on. I love these double primroses. They come in all kinds of colours and they've got this lovely old-fashioned look. This one is called Quaker's Bonnet, and a lot of people think that's the double form of Primula subthorpii, which is another really good single-flowered one. My clump came from one single plant 3 years ago. 18 months ago I divided it, and just look at it now. Well, it's a really busy time in the garden at the moment, so today we have a bumper spring special for you. 3/4 of an hour of activity and inspiration, which we hope will set you off for the best gardening year you've ever had. Later in the programme, Stephen Lacey shows us how to make the best of some beautiful clematis. We'll be visiting a couple in Wales who fell in love with their garden and with each other. We'll have a special report on last autumn's early chrysanthemum show, and Pippa Greenwood will be explaining why some of our daffodils stubbornly refuse to come into flower. But first, a reminder of the beautiful weather last summer when Gay Search visited a lovely cottage garden in Avon.
When Lesley Rossey and her husband moved into Erne Cottage 13 years ago, the garden was completely overgrown with field elm, brambles, burdock and thistles. But it did have wonderful views of the Cotswolds and a natural stream running along one boundary. And even though at that stage Lesley's only experience of gardening was a few pansies in a window box, she felt instinctively that underneath that jungle there was the potential for a truly magical garden. One of the things that's so striking about your garden, Lesley, is your use of colour, which I think is lovely. Do you have any colour principles that you work to?
I do try and separate out the colours because that gives me a theme to work to when planting any particular border. But I do use all the colours in different areas, so I'll have hot reds and yellows at the entrance to the garden where I want it to be cheerful, and I'll use subtle lilacs and silvers near a sitting area where I want to be restful.
And have you acquired those notions through trial and error? Have you made lots of mistakes in the past?
I think if you narrow down your colour choice to begin with, you're less likely to make those mistakes. You can then introduce other plants into the scheme just by bringing the plant up to that border and seeing whether it'll fit or whether it'll improve it.
So you actually put it in its pot first and have a look and...
Quite often, yes. And in an established border, yes, I'll introduce another plant temporarily in a pot just to see how it fits in with the scheme of things.
Are there any colours that you absolutely would never use in combination?
I don't like to rule anything out. For example, I discovered that a scarlet red goes really well with apricot colours. So in my white border, I have introduced at times scarlets and apricot colours as well, and that makes a very pleasing combination.
Would you plant a garden for somebody else in a very different way from the way you've planted your own?
Oh, very much so. I mean, most of the gardens I design would depend on far fewer plants in terms of variety. I think you could create the same sort of effect as we've got here using fewer plants. I stuff all sorts of plants in, partly because I'm experimenting, so I'm always introducing new plants into the garden just to see how they do and how one works with another and how they perform over the years. So yes, planting for somebody else, I'd use far fewer plants to create a similar sort of effect, and I think it would be a little bit, hopefully a little bit more of a refined garden as well as a result.
You've got so many different conditions in your garden. There's everything from deep boggy shade to this really hot sun-baked south-facing terrace. And obviously you've planted accordingly.
Yes, there's a lot of things tucked into the cracks here. Some of them have run around quite a lot, like this creeping campanula pusula, I call it, but it may be called campanula cochlearifolia.
Very pretty. You've also got some nice foliage. You've got the Raulia here, which I think is an Australian plant, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
And this lovely Acina, which is so pretty. And it's very good with this brown-leaf geranium, which is striking, but not that easy to place, is it?
And I didn't put it there because the first plant started off in the bed above, and these are the babies that have seeded into the cracks, but I've just let them be.
Yes, it's lovely. Oh, a lovely little green oasis out of the sun. So this is your bog garden?
Yes. Although it's right by the stream is so low now, and especially in the summertime, there's only just a trickle down there. And so to gain more moisture in this area, we've got a water feature sitting in the middle there.
Oh, right.
A terracotta bowl overflows with water, and we've got a hose that runs all the way up the stream to gain enough height for it to siphon into the bowl there. The tiered section is a much later addition.
And different conditions to down here?
Not as wet in the raised beds there, but because they're north-facing and because we put plenty of organic matter into the soil there, it means that it's fairly moisture-retentive soil, but we can see it's catching the sunlight, so it also provides a sunny position. So it's a place where you can grow those plants that like that moisture-retentive, well-drained soil in a sunny position, which sounds impossible, but I think I've achieved it there.
Obviously you must have learnt over the years how to cut down on the more routine jobs. What sort of tips can you pass on to busy gardeners?
I like to think I garden efficiently so that I'm not wasting time when I come out here. If I've got an hour in the garden, I'll go and collect my barrow and all my tools, have everything I might need for any sort of job, and off I go into the garden. And then I can tackle any job that I see needs doing in the border without having to run back to the garage to collect a tool that I hadn't got on me.
Do you find as you go around the garden now, you can actually spot your passions, as it were? That was the year you were mad about this, and that was the year it was grasses.
Well, I think my real passions stay with me. The foxgloves I love. So I wouldn't say I had passing phases that I never returned to. I think when I have a passion, it's for life.
We all do have our gardening passions, don't we? And one of mine is sweet peas. So here in my parterre garden, I'm going to use them to solve a particular problem. But first of all, I think you'll be interested in the results of a little trial here. Now, these sweet peas were sown in a cold frame in September. These were sown also in a cold frame in November, and these were sown in February. And I think it's pretty obvious that if you want really first-rate plants, then the September sowing is the one to go for. Now, if you're growing your sweet peas scrambling up a support, then you want as many side shoots as you can get. So if they haven't already started making them, now's the time just to pinch out the top with your thumb and forefinger, and they'll soon start growing out. This one was done a couple of weeks ago, and you can see that already the side shoots are beginning to come. Now, I'm going to use these to solve this problem of mine. These angle iron posts support my fan-trained fruit trees, and angle iron at the best of times is not a very pretty material. So what I've done is to surround them with this cylinder of wire netting, which I've sprayed blue, and now I'm going to plant my sweet peas at the base here, and that should grow away pretty fast, scramble up the thing, and look really beautiful. But if you want real exhibition sweet peas, there's a better way to do it. Every year on my allotment I grow miles too many runner beans, with the result that many of them simply don't get picked. So this year I'm going to cut down on the beans and use the canes to grow some exhibition sweet peas. Now the canes are set a foot apart for beans, but for sweet peas you could go quite a bit closer at 8 or 9 inches. And notice too that I've put down some black polythene in between the two rows, because there's nothing worse than trying to weed in between the rows of beans or sweet peas. Now the sweet peas are planted up against the cane in the normal way. And just look at that root system, that's really nice, isn't it? And they just go in there like that. But now, instead of growing several side shoots up, you only use one shoot like that. So you cut out the side shoots. Bear in mind it is a side shoot and not the main stem, because that's likely to go blind early on in the season. Now later in the season you're going to have to take out all the side shoots and all the tendrils from this stem too. So quite obviously it's not going to be able to support itself. So you've got to help it, and I use these little sweet pea rings and just put it up against the plant like that, round the cane. Perfect. Now this variety is so new that I'm not actually allowed to tell you what it is just yet, but hopefully all will be revealed at the Chelsea Flower Show in the middle of May. Now, sweet peas must surely be the most popular of our climbers, but running them a very close second is clematis, and Stephen Lacey is a real enthusiast.
Few groups of flowering plants have such a long season as clematis. Here on the west-facing wall of Brook Cottage, Pale d'Azur is at its peak. And as you can see, there's nothing quite like these large flowered forms for giving the garden a bit of oomph. They come in a range of colours, and between them can provide a spectacle from May until the autumn. Joining them are a host of smaller flowered varieties. Individually, the blooms may not be as dramatic, but they're full of personality. This is Minuet with a white stripe through the magenta. And like most of them, it appears in a great cloudburst. Alba luxurians looks as if it's been dipped in green ink. And this is one of my favourites, a climber with one of the longest names of any garden plant, Clematis Viticella purpurea plana elegans, with double rosettes the colour of faded velvet curtains. The obvious place to put clematis is up walls, and here they're grown both in sun and shade. There are other ways of growing them. They're effective out in the open border, grown up wire-covered posts and frames to provide a vertical accent or a plume of late colour. This is Victoria in partnership with a smaller flowered Étoile Violette. And here they're actually also serving a double purpose, blotting out a manhole cover. Of course, clematis are most at home growing into a living support. Here, Madame Julia Correvon is scrambling into an upright cherry, having been planted a few feet away. But often it's neater and easier to plant the clematis up against a wall or fence and simply train its flowering stems into the host shrub or tree. Clematis Viticella is giving a second flowering season to the Moroccan broom. And Buddleia Nanho Blue is partnered by the mauve Margaret Hunt. All clematis want a good support system to twine through, and against a wall, one of the best methods is a widely spaced mesh with vertical as well as horizontal wires. The stems can then be trained out into a fan shape. There's a lot of confusion over the pruning of clematis, but all these late-blooming, large and small-flowered varieties at Brook Cottage are treated in the same way, cut back to a low framework of stems in late February or March. This keeps the plants fairly well clothed, almost to the ground, and the flower power is boosted by a good dollop of manure in spring, and occasionally a high potash feed a little later. A cool, moist root run is the other key to success. If there isn't natural shade, a piece of broken pot or pipe around the roots will help to create it. Afterwards, it's a matter of watering frequently during dry spells. Here it's done once a week. Really, it's very hard to think of another group of plants that can rival clematis for sheer flower impact so late in the year. And here in August, there are varieties like Étoile Rose still only poised to launch themselves over the border.
It's amazing, isn't it, that you could have clematis in flower for about 9 months of the year wherever you live, and in warmer areas even longer. Now, it's time for dividing herbaceous plants, and the normal way is just to lift the clump and split pieces off the outside and replant them. But with ornamental rhubarb, the recommended way is to do it in the autumn and just split it in half with a sharp spade. But if it's just new plants you're after, there is a much better way. You just look for these little buds, and before they open, you cut them off as close to the plant as you possibly can, like that. And you can see a little bit of the old plant there. Just put it in a mixture of 50-50 coir and vermiculite. Put them in a shaded cold frame, and in next to no time they'll root and you'll have a new plant. Well, you may feel that rhubarb is a little bit of a mundane subject, so let me introduce you to a man who gave up everything for his garden and found romance.
In about 1985-86, I got fed up with the rat race in Hertfordshire and decided to look for somewhere else to live. And I toured England, didn't find anything I particularly liked, and then decided to do Wales. I stayed in this small village in a bed and breakfast hotel and sat in the bar, as you do, chatting about things in general, and a man at the bar said that his brother had his place for sale. And it was this place, and I just loved it. I just felt as if I was coming home. The house was pretty basic, a stone-built Welsh house, started in around 1650 and then evolved from then on. The place was in a pretty mess. I met Joan in about April '88, and she, being a horsey type person, was looking for grazing. She came round, very nervous, and asked me if I would let her rent some grazing, and we just got to like each other. Joan's a widow, and I was divorced, and we just got together. It was lovely, super. Joan's a very, very planty person, whereas I would rather do the shapes and directions of paths and laying lawns and things.
When I first started gardening, it was all purely trial and error, and I didn't tend to read any gardening books. And I'm very glad I didn't, really, because you imagine a place where you want the plant to be and you'll plant it. And this has worked for us. When I moved here, Paul had already planted this phormium, and he decided that it would be rather nice to have one on this side to frame the doorway and the steps. So we went to a local garden centre to buy a phormium and came back with this. Well, you see, I didn't know that that one was called a phormium, And of course you can see that this is a cordyline, but we've learned to live with our mistake.
I have a obsession with trees. I've planted between 1,000 and 1,500 trees to try and keep some of the wind out. And in 88, 89 we had quite a severe drought. I don't know if the rest of the country had it, but being on pure sand, we had to water all these trees, and I watered every tree twice a week.
And not being on mains water, we couldn't just turn the tap on willy-nilly. We had to walk across the road and carry watering cans to water all these young trees. We had arms almost like gorillas by the time we'd finished with carrying so many cans of water. But it was worth it in the end.
I went out to look at the earliest opportunity for peculiar trees and found an Acacia dealbata and Eucalyptus gunnii, which were about as thick as your finger and about 3 foot high, and had to keep them indoors because it was so very, very cold in 87, January, February 87. Planted them in March 87, and away they went.
The acacia is absolutely marvellous. I've never been abroad and never seen an acacia, and we get a lot of people coming to visit the garden that say, oh, it reminds us of France, it reminds us of Spain, and it truly is. I think I could say it's my favourite tree here because it's so beautiful all the year round, even when it's not in flower. In September the foliage is so thick that you can't see through the branches, and it's really marvellous. We planted a silver birch hedge as a shelter belt, which unfortunately didn't work. So we decided to build a double fence and fill it in with our garden rubbish. We put twigs, we put sand and the weeds, and I even put some of the horse manure when I'm picking it up out of the fields into this double fence, and eventually I would imagine it'd all consolidate and form a mound. This has stopped a lot of the wind damaging the back of the acacia. My favourite thing about gardening is actually propagating plants or growing from seeds, and I can't wait to see if they've taken root, and I'm doing what I'm not supposed to do, continually just seeing if there's a slight resistance, just pull them slightly or tip the pot up and see whether it's got roots on. The delight I get in finding that my cuttings have rooted is, it never changes. We decided to try a hand at growing tender plants. We'll buy a plant, and if a book says that it's going to be slightly tender, we'll take a few cuttings from it, and it's not until we've got some quite mature plants from the cuttings will we plant the parent plant outside.
Just look at this ducky. It just comes up so lovely, it's pure sand.
When we plant any of our plants, we give them a generous feed of horse manure. We dig a large hole, put plenty of well-rotted horse manure in the bottom of the hole.
What's it called?
Corolopsis wilmottii spring purple. We don't want to improve or change the structure of the sand or soil too much because the drainage wouldn't be suitable for these tender plants. We're extremely lucky that both of ours' passion is gardening, because when there are two of you doing the garden together, you can do so much. Paul has the ideas, he has the visions, he can see where a path should go. Or basically, I just love the plants and I plant the plants so that if Paul wasn't here, I wouldn't have a beautiful garden. If I wasn't here, I don't think Paul's garden would look like this either. So it's the two of us that have made the garden together.
The whole place is run absolutely on a shoestring. But when you walk out into the garden, the birds are singing, and flowers and shrubs are out, and it's peaceful. The quality of life is just absolutely fantastic. There's just no comparison.
It just shows you what you can do in 10 years, doesn't it? Well, that was their 10th anniversary. The National Chrysanthemum Society have gone just a little bit better because they were founded 150 years ago. And in honour of the anniversary, I'm going to be joining them and growing some exhibition chrysanthemums this year, and I hope that you'll join me too. Now, if you do want to, the first thing you've got to do is to order your chrysanthemums, and you should do that straight away. The best place to go is a mail order specialist, so get hold of a catalogue, and when the plants arrive there'll be something like this, and these are really nice little plants. And as soon as they come, get them unpacked and box them up as quickly as you can. And the ideal containers are these polystyrene boxes, which you should be able to catch from your fishmonger. Now they are oh dear, a bit pongy, but I don't suppose the chrysanthemums are going to mind that too much. Now, the ideal compost is a soil-based one, John Innes number 2 or number 3. And in a box of this size, you want no more than about 6 plants. But don't forget to label them, because you'll want to know what they are later on, because of course you can take cuttings of these at the end of the season. Now, these are a mixture of sprays which have several flowers per stem and disbuds which have 1 perfectly shaped flower per stem. Now, once they're in, you need to give them a really good watering in. Just settle that compost around the roots and give them a really good drink. But after that, you need to treat them a bit rough. Chrysanthemums will stand a degree or 2 of frost, and they're much better grown hard. So the ideal place for them is the cold frame. Now, this time of the year, you should be all right, but if a really hard frost threatens, well, a bit of Bobflower's old carpet over the top will soon sort it out. Now, from now on, you need to keep the plants really quite dry. Wait until the leaves are almost wilting before you water them again, and then the roots will spread out in search of water, and you'll get a really good root system. And hopefully, at the end of the year, I shall have chrysanthemums as good as those at last year's Chrysanthemum Society National Show. All I need now is a caravan.
My first show, I carried them wrapped up in a sheet of white paper, and I carried them on the bus. And I travelled about 10 miles on the bus. And then I took them to a show in Leeds, in the town hall, and running across the car park, I got stopped by a police sergeant. And the police sergeant said, "What have you got there?" I said, "I've got flowers." He says, "Come on." He says, "What have you got there?" I said, "They're flowers." He says, "You're joking." I started in the early 30s. When my father had a great big greenhouse, and all he wanted to do was grow large exhibitions. And he had to make a living out of it, but you couldn't make a living out of it at all, not in the early 30s. You sent stuff to the market and get nothing in return. And I got interested then because he went into hospital for 12 months, and I had the job of looking after them. And I did then my first show over on the sort of coast over Lancashire, and I won 14 prizes at the first show, and I think that set me off, you see.
How old were you then?
How old was I then? 14. When you go to a show, your heart will drop, because you go into the door and you see magnificent flowers, and you think, why have I come here today with these? Until you bring them out of the box and you put them up on the bench and you compare them to, you think that they're not bad, these, and then you're elated, you see. First of all, you've got your cutting process, which has got to be done virtually 24 hours before you go. You've got to cut and you've got to soak them in water before you pack them into the boxes. And if you're coming from over 200 miles, you've got to put something on the end which is going to retain the water, you see.
So what are you doing there, Hughie?
Well, I'm boiling the ends of the stems to allow the plant to take water up. They're going a bit soft because when we've been fetching them in a travelling case, they've drunk all the waters in the bottle. And this is one method we use to force them to harden up again. Okay.
Then you will vase them up, 5 to a vase or 3 to the vase according to the class, and you will select the biggest and best bloom for the back centre, the 2 next largest for left and right wing, and the 2 shallowest, smallest for the front, you see. Really, you're trying to con the judge, but the judge knows this, so he's got to look at those. Now, you can be doing this all the way through the night, and it gets very, very tiring. But besides doing this, you've got to do a bit of artificial manipulation on some of the florets to put them into line, to take the kinks out, what they call dressing, you see. Now, an exhibitor with 9 vases or more will probably have his wife or a daughter or 2 or 3 helpers to help with the dressing. Many a time they'll spend 1 hour on one bloom.
People seem to describe it more like hairdressing, you know, making sure all the hair's in place and teasing it to the way that you want it to go. Like these petals here, you sort of bring down and put into place. I like to think nature would do that, but obviously it doesn't.
Well, that leaves a lot to be desired, doesn't it? But the staging's all right.
Yeah, the staging's okay before we touch it.
No problem.
That's okay.
Right?
Yep.
That's won it hands down.
But providing it's good. So we're going to have it down?
Yeah. We'll start at this end with the meaty looking vase. I think this one's performed this year, Johnny.
Yeah. Looks clean, tight, just a little bit, but nothing. Nice.
Chrysanthemums originated in China, and they were grown in China 700 BC. And it was Chrysanthemum indicum and Chrysanthemum sinensis. And then from China, they made their way into Japan. But it wasn't until about 1790 that it came into England. And then those 2 original species were developed, and we've got Chrysanthemum morifolium, which is what you can see here in this show. In England, we've probably got the best climate in the world for growing chrysanthemums, you see. And the people who used to show them were the gardeners of the gentlemen in the area, like the Right Honourable so-and-so had a head gardener, and the head gardener showed the flowers in his lordship's name, and many a time the head gardener kept the prize money as a little bit of a perk, you see. The working man got interested, and they really didn't get interested in this country with earlies like these until about 1928. The normal, miner or factory worker could grow a few chrysanthemums in the open garden, and he could take them to the new shows which were in the RHS halls at Westminster. And we've done that virtually ever since the early days. nowadays, you see, there are too many leisure pursuits, too many other activities, so the young growers aren't coming really into chrysanthemums, but they don't realise what they're missing.
What are they missing?
What are they missing? Oh, they're missing the challenge of growing a plant which I think offers more challenge to anybody than any other species of plant. It's a mixture of character. You need a good, strong character, and you've got to be dedicated if you want to get to this level.
Well, I'm certainly going to have a try, I promise. Now, we've had a lot of letters about the complexities of pruning hydrangeas, and they can be a little bit confusing, but easy when you know how. Now, this one is hydrangea macrophylla. That's the one that makes the big flower heads or the lace caps. Now, they flower on wood that they made the year before. So what you do is this. This is last year's flower, so you just trace that down to a healthy pair of buds, and you can see that there's one here that's actually been frosted, so I'm going down a little bit further than that to this lovely fat juicy pair down there, and that's where I shall prune. And you do exactly the same thing right the way over the bush. Now, this is Hydrangea arborescens Annabelle. That's the one with the lovely big white blooms. And like Hydrangea paniculata, this has to be pruned rather differently because both of these flower on wood that they're going to make this year. Now, obviously, if you know the name of the variety, it's easy, but if you don't know, then you'll just have to observe what type of wood it flowers on this year, and then you'll know for the future. And what you do with this one is to look for the lowest pair of healthy buds you can see and cut right back to those. And you go over the whole bush in the same way. I must admit that when it's finished, it looks a bit sorry for itself, but don't worry, it'll soon grow out and look wonderful.
At the end of a long, cold winter, there's nothing better than the sight of a drift of gorgeous golden daffodils or other narcissus to cheer you up. But what if yours aren't looking good? In fact, they're a bit of a disappointment with grotty leaves or poor flowers. Well, there could be several different reasons for this. One thing that's been really common this year is blindness. Instead of getting a good show of flowers, all you've got are plenty of perfectly healthy looking green leaves. The most likely reason is simply that last summer was so incredibly hot and dry, which meant the bulbs couldn't take up all the moisture and nutrients they need in order to be able to swell and produce the flower buds for this year. If you've got naturalised bulbs, or bulbs which have become really quite congested in large clumps, that too could be causing blindness because they simply can't get the moisture and food that they need. So it might be time to start thinking about dividing congested clumps and, of course, keeping them well fed. You can use a general fertiliser now and then a foliar feed applied over the leaf area throughout the growing season. And of course, if we do have another hot, dry summer, make sure that you keep all your bulbs, in particular your daffodils, really well watered. At first sight, these daffodils probably don't look too bad. They've certainly got plenty of lovely, healthy, fat flower buds. But take a look at the clump as a whole and it's strangely distorted and stunted. And the leaves have got some horrible bright yellow streaks all over the foliage, particularly towards the tip. This clump is really badly virus infected. And unlike those blind daffodils, there's nothing you can do about this. The infection's in the whole of the plant. And worse still, if an aphid or black fly, green fly, comes along and feeds on this plant and then walks, flies or hops onto another narcissus, it will spread it. So if you do see anything like this in the garden, it's really important to take it up immediately and dispose of it, preferably by burning. Don't even wait for it to finish flowering. If you think your garden's let you down a bit this year, it's encouraging to know that a lot of commercial growers have had problems with their narcissus crops too. But the yellowing on these leaves is entirely different from the virus infection. Although the overall effect might look rather similar with slightly stunted plants and yellowed leaves, there are none of those distinct streaks and stripes on the foliage. And in fact, all this is due to is weather damage or frosting of the young shoots as they came above ground. So for heaven's sake, if you see something like this, particularly if it's on a variety which you know is a touch tender, don't get rid of it, but instead just give it a bit of extra tender loving care and hopefully it'll be all right again next year. But it's not just weather that can cause leaf injury. This strange yellowed but now brown and quite dry, crispy leaf tip is actually due to a fungal infection, and later on it gets covered in a fuzzy growth. So with this sort of thing, it really is well worthwhile picking off the injured leaf tips and perhaps spraying over the whole of the foliage with a fungicide as soon as you spot the problem. And this is a fungal infection that really looks as if it has got out of hand. There's virtually nothing left in this bed, and I suspect it's something called basil rot. Lift it out. Oh, already you can see there are not a lot of roots on it. And I reckon if I cut it lengthwise, you can usually see the typical symptoms of basil rot. And this is caused by a fungus known as fusarium, which attacks the basal plate, that area right around the base of the bulb, and then of course starts to kill off the roots so that you get very few of them left and quite a lot which are starting to just deteriorate and rot away. And obviously a bulb like this is never going to be able to survive any length of time because it simply can't take up the food and moisture. When a bulb's in this sort of condition, there really is nothing you can do with it. But if you manage to catch it early, or perhaps other bulbs in a less affected bed, it's worth lifting those at the end of the season and dipping them in a solution of carbendazim for about half an hour. And that fungicide will help to kill off any remaining spores of the fungus and make sure that when you replant, of course on a fresh site, the following year, you shouldn't see any further signs of the problem. So by keeping a lookout for problems like this now and doing what you have to as soon as possible, and then making sure that the bulbs are kept really well fed and watered, you should hopefully have a smashing crop of daffodils next year.
Yes, keeping up with the gardening at this time of the year really is very important, and no place more so than in the vegetable garden. There are lots of things you should be sowing this weekend, and if you do nothing else, get in those things that take a long time to germinate, like the parsnips. Now, it's a bit of a late season, so you can catch up by buying primed seed. Now, this is seed that has been started into germination and then stopped again, and it's all raring to go, so it should come up faster than ordinary seed. Just to check it out, I'm going to sow a row of primed parsnips here and a row of ordinary seed next to it and just see what happens.